Jackie Robinson opened a door, alone. He paid the price alone. He stayed silent. He smiled. He was provoked, taunted, humiliated in ways that would have broken most men before the second week of April. And he never responded. Not because he wasn't angry. He was angry every single day. But because Branch Rickey had asked him to be something more than angry, had asked him to be the proof that a black man could play in the major leagues with the same skill, the same dignity, the same professionalism as any white player. And that proof required silence, required the specific discipline of a man who understood that what he was doing was larger than himself, that the door he was opening needed to stay open, and that staying open required him to absorb everything without breaking. 10 years later, Bob Gibson walked through that door. And Gibson had not come to be silent. Gibson had come to pitch. And Gibson pitched the way the decade demanded. With fury, with precision, with the specific aggression of a man who had watched what silence cost and decided that he had not come to baseball to pay that price. 2 men, 1 door. 2 entirely different ways of holding it open. But if one had not come first, the other could never have followed. That is the story. That is always the story. Jackie Robinson was born January 31st, 1919, in Cairo, Georgia, the son of a sharecropper who left the family before Jackie was a year old. His mother moved the family to Pasadena, California, where Robinson grew up poor in a city that was not interested in his comfort or his ambitions, but that accidentally gave him access to athletics that Georgia never would have. He was extraordinary at everything: football, basketball, track, baseball. At UCLA, he became the first athlete in the school's history to letter in 4 sports simultaneously. He was drafted into the Army in 1942 and spent 3 years navigating the specific humiliations of a military that asked black men to fight for a country that treated them as second-class citizens. He was court-martialed for refusing to move to the back of a military bus, charges that were eventually dropped, and honorably discharged in 1944. He was 25 years old and had already been tested in ways that most people are never tested. Branch Rickey found him playing in the Negro Leagues for the Kansas City Monarchs, saw in him not just the talent, but the specific combination of intelligence, self-control, and inner toughness that the situation would demand. Asked him to come to Brooklyn, asked him to accept what was coming without responding to it. Robinson said yes, knowing exactly what yes meant. The first season, 1947, was what Robinson had agreed to and what he delivered. The Philadelphia Phillies manager Ben Chapman directed sustained verbal assault from the dugout for 3 consecutive games. The specific content of what was said has been described in accounts that make clear it was not heckling, but targeted dehumanization. Robinson heard every word. His teammates heard every word. Robinson did not respond, did not charge, did not even change his expression in a way that would give Chapman's words the acknowledgement of a reaction. He played. He hit. He ran the bases with a speed and aggression that contradicted everything the sport had been told about what a black player could do. He won Rookie of the Year. The Dodgers won the pennant. And the door that had been closed was open. It did not open easily. It did not open without cost. But it was open. Bob Gibson was born November 9, 1935, in Omaha, Nebraska, the youngest of 7 children. His father died 3 months before he was born. He grew up in a public housing project, raised by his oldest brother Josh, who worked multiple jobs and made sure the youngest Gibson got the nutrition and the opportunity that the others had gone without. Gibson was sick constantly as a child: rickets, hay fever, asthma, a heart condition that doctors monitored throughout his childhood and that should, by any reasonable medical prediction, have limited what his body could sustain. It did not limit him. He played basketball well enough to be offered a contract with the Harlem Globetrotters. He played baseball well enough that the St. Louis Cardinals signed him in 1957. He arrived in the major leagues in 1959, 2 years after Robinson's retirement, and brought with him something that Robinson's decade of discipline had not been designed to produce. He brought anger that was not managed, not suppressed, not redirected into performance as a substitute. He brought anger that was the performance. That was the point. That showed up in every pitch and every at-bat and every interaction with every hitter who stepped into the box against him. Gibson threw inside, not as strategy alone, as statement. The inside part of the plate was his. The inside part of the plate against every hitter, regardless of reputation, regardless of history, regardless of how many times they had faced him before, was a space that Gibson claimed at the beginning of every at-bat. He hit batters, more than almost anyone of his era, and he did not apologize for it, would not apologize for it. If you crowded the plate against Bob Gibson, you were told, through the specific language of a fastball at your ribs, that the plate had boundaries, and you had exceeded them. Some pitchers throw inside as a tactic. Gibson threw inside as a philosophy, a declaration of the terms under which he was willing to compete. His terms, not yours. If you didn't like the terms, you were welcome to take first base and think about it on the way there. The 1968 season was Gibson's statement season, the season that validated everything about how he approached pitching. He finished with an earned run average of 1.12, the lowest ERA in the history of the live ball era. He pitched 304 2/3 innings. He threw 28 complete games. He struck out 268 batters and walked 62. He won 22 games. He was, in 1968, the most dominant pitcher in baseball, in a way that had no close competitor. And he did it with a demeanor that communicated, in every inning of every start, that he was not there to be comfortable, and he was not there to make you comfortable. And the only relevant question was whether you were going to hit his pitches, because he was certainly going to keep throwing them. Subscribe if you've ever stood on the shoulders of someone who paid a price you didn't have to pay. Hit like if you think both Robinson and Gibson were right. And drop a comment, who do you think had the harder job? Because what Gibson said about Robinson explains everything about why the door stayed open. Robinson retired after the 1956 season. 10 years, 6 pennants, 1 World Series championship, a batting average of .311 over a career spent absorbing what the sport asked him to absorb and producing what the sport demanded he produce. He had integrated baseball at a cost that the statistics cannot capture. The cost was in the daily discipline of not responding, of smiling when smiling was the last thing he wanted to do, of being the proof when being the proof required being something less than fully human in the eyes of people who were doing the requiring. He had paid that cost because he understood that the door had to open somehow, and he was the man chosen to open it. But he was clear, in later years, that the cost had been real, that the smile had been a performance, that the discipline had not come free. He had given baseball 10 years of himself, and given them under conditions that nobody who came after would have to accept. Gibson knew Robinson, respected him with the specific depth of respect that one competitor gives another when the other has done something the first understands to be extraordinary. He said in interviews across his career that Robinson had made everything possible, that without Robinson's decade of silence and endurance and proof, the door through which Gibson had walked would not have existed. He was unambiguous about this, grateful in the way that someone who understands history is grateful, not sentimentally, but with the clear-eyed acknowledgement of what someone else's sacrifice had purchased. But Gibson also said something else. He said that he had not come to baseball to be silent, that Robinson's silence had been necessary for its moment, and that Gibson's refusal to be silent was necessary for his, that the two approaches were not contradictions but continuations. Robinson had opened the door by being undeniable in the face of everything that tried to close it. Gibson had kept it open by refusing to accept that being undeniable required silence, by showing that a black pitcher could throw inside and hit batters and refuse to apologize and dominate completely, and that none of it would close the door that Robinson had opened. The door was stronger than that now. Robinson had made it stronger. Gibson just walked through it and made clear it was going to stay open. They met occasionally, in the way that men who have been part of the same long story meet. with awareness of the shared narrative, with respect that doesn't require extensive elaboration, with the specific recognition of two people who understand what the other has done. Robinson watched Gibson pitch and saw something he had never been permitted to be. Gibson watched Robinson receive recognition for what he had done and understood the dimensions of what it had cost. Neither man would have said they were the same. They were not the same. Their personalities were different. Their approaches were different. Their relationships with the press and the public and their own anger were different. But the story they were part of was the same story. A story about a door that one man had opened and another had walked through and kept open. A story about what a generation can do for the next one and what the next one does with what it's given. Robinson gave Gibson baseball. Gibson gave baseball Gibson. And the game was never again what it had been before either of them arrived. Bob Gibson retired after the 1975 season. 251 career wins. 3,117 strikeouts. 2 Cy Young Awards. 1 World Series MVP. A career ERA of 2.91. Hall of Fame inducted in 1981, the first year he was eligible. Jackie Robinson had been inducted in 1962, also the first year he was eligible. Both first ballot, both undeniable, both remembered not just for what they produced but for what they represented. Robinson, the proof that the door could open. Gibson, the proof that it would stay open. One man's silence and one man's fury, both necessary, both right, both part of the same unfinished conversation that baseball has been having with itself ever since 1947. A conversation about what the sport owes the people who play it, about what courage looks like in different eras, about the price that gets paid in one generation so that the next one can pay a different price, about doors, and who opens them, and who walks through, and what it means that they do.